if you know how to use those negative feelings to your advantage, it's a great thing in your life. If you know how to use that to be creative or to motivate yourself to exercise, because a lot of people deal with emotions through exercise. So if you can use those negative thoughts and that negative energy to turn it into something positive or to kind of just rear it towards the right direction, then dealing with it becomes easier. So then I think something just snapped randomly in my head. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. Like, I can't just like put this off. I get the gun out of the drawer and I sit on my mom's bed and I was just looking at myself in the mirror for like about a good hour. As soon as I pulled and I didn't die, because I was thinking, all right, done. And then I'm just staring at myself in the mirror with a gun to my head with my hand already pulled on the trigger. Wow. I just couldn't like process all of it. Went and like slept and just like cried myself to sleep. And then when my mom came home, I just pretended like nothing had happened because I didn't want to freak her out. It was kind of strange because growing up also in Lebanon, it's something that no one talks about. It's a very taboo subject, mental health and depression. Like, what's that? You're just sad. Stop being a wussy and, you know, grow up kind of thing. So I think I was around 11 years old or 12 years old when I started feeling like sad all the time. Yeah. And I didn't understand it. I was like, you know, everyone feels sad. It's a sucky world, you know?
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Like I was like, okay, everybody's sad. It's not just me. And I started noticing, no, I think I'm a little bit sadder than everyone else around me.
We are really excited to be able to be sponsored by People's Bank. I have really enjoyed, actually, personally, my time with People's Bank. They have wonderful customer service. They have never lost my money, which is always a good thing. People's Bank, headquartered in Marietta, Ohio since 1902, People's Bank has established a heritage of financial stability, growth, and community impact across Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia. As CEO of our behavioral health agency, Life and Purpose Behavioral Health, we have been doing so much with them. One of the things that we look for in our sponsors is companies, businesses that are just really wanting to make an effort in reducing stigma with mental health and addiction, and People's Bank does that in spades. They have always been a strong supporter of this mission, and they just continue to support the things that we do and trying to better our community. So we're very thankful for that.
Can I still feel grounded in these belief systems and entertain other ideas?
Finally, they sent me to prison. That was it for me. From that point forward, I will do whatever it takes. This is not the life that I want.
This is a thinking disease with a using problem. They're not bad people learning how to be good. You're sick and learning how to be well.
Welcome back to another episode of the Resilient Purpose Podcast. I'm excited for today's episode. We're joined by Husain Habhab, who is going to tell his story and his experience with mental health and his ability to recover from suicide and being able to share his journey and help others find healing with their mental health. So hope you guys enjoy.
Well, like the biggest similarities in the cultures were kind of like Lebanese culture, which was considered an Eastern society, and China. They both have this view of mental health of kind of being like an imperfection or a blemish, kind of like
you're broken, something's wrong with you.
Yeah, or like, oh God, don't tell your cousins that you're like sad. Jeez, you know, you don't want to be the weak one. So, especially, I don't know if you want me to start going in like deep. Are we going?
Yeah,
deep into the deep end.
Go for it, man.
In China, for example, because there I was working as a graphic designer and a marketer and a teacher for this one company that my friend owned. So getting to teach part-time was awesome because you get to like meet all these great kids and they're like super full of fun and life when they come to you because
they haven't been damaged yet.
Kind of like that, but it's more like they finally get to have fun because most of the other time their parents are like piano lessons, English lessons.
All the serious academic kind of,
and a very academic and structured agenda. So when they would come to our class and their foreign taught class would be more fun. And like, you'd actually have activities and like the teachers would be more like caring and we'd want to play and actually get to know the kids and hug them and high five them and just have fun. And you'd see the difference as soon as the parents come in or when they're back into the routine, how it's kind of like, it turns off.
Everybody kind of
sits up. I remember I was teaching this one class and it was a 40, 50 kid size class. So it was like,
that's a big class.
A lot of eyes staring at you and they're like, oh, what is he going to say next? Like, I'm like, oh my God. So they were having fun and we were like goofing around. I was asking them questions and like we kind of sang songs, you know, it was a good part-time gig. And then I remember official teacher of the class. She's like the main head teacher of their like little class. Came in and she just like with this ruler, kind of like the size of my arm, just whacks the table. And I saw these kids go super speed up. And they're taught to be perfect. They want perfection and nothing but. So anything other than perfection is unacceptable. So with
they make that clear. I mean, that's pretty overt.
Not in the society itself, but the parents.
Yeah.
I guess society has a part to play in it, but I don't want to like judge the whole society over it. But there, because of how everything was in the past, kind of like you got to take what you can because there's so little of it. The parents were also limited to having a one-child policy, so they're limited to having one kid. So it's either you make it or break it kind of situation.
This is your only chance. Oh my Lord!
Kind of like the Eminem song. You only get one shot. Yeah.
Right.
But so like they kind of live their life like that, where it's like I have to succeed. I'm the only one, and all the parents' energy and the grandparents' energy was in that one kid. So it's a lot of eyes on you, even at a very young age. So mental health or depression is kind of like.
That's going to ruin that. You're not going to be able to achieve and be successful. And so you can't let anybody know.
Yeah. Well, in their eyes, it was kind of like, yeah, exactly that. And also like, you need to like ace your exams at the end of the year. Don't give me this I'm sad thing. Like, let's focus. Like that was their view of mental health. Like, no.
It's something you can control. You can just put aside, compartmentalize and
then make it get worse. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And did you see that? Or, I mean, I know you're probably working with young, but maybe you saw that, like, did it manifest in adulthood or does it manifest in childhood? I mean, cause you don't, at least over here, I don't necessarily hear about what it's like mental health and how those things are, dealt with or engaged. And I'm curious as to how that happens or what you noticed.
Well, I noticed them when I was first year. So I was very new to China. Yeah. And my little girl, Jenny, I know she's not watching it, but love you. She's adorable. And she was around like 6 years old. And I think you can start at a young age where you start to notice that they do get sad or they're lacking attention or they just like they're missing some joy in their life. And when she would come to my class, we'd just hang out and like have fun and just be best buds. And, she would like cry and be sad when she wants to leave. And over the couple of years of teaching her, I think by the third year when I was going to head out back to the States, I noticed she was getting slowly and like more aggressive with time. Like she was getting more aggressive or she wasn't knowing how to communicate her emotions in class. Like before, if she had a problem with another kid or someone stealing something, she was just so sweet. She'd be like, oh, thank you. Here you go. Like she's adorable.
Very gentle. And, yeah.
Over the years, she became more and more like, this is my toy. And like, she would whack another kid, like for no reason, just more aggression. Like, and I wasn't used to her acting like that, but I could slowly see it developing. As well as another kid he was 10 years old and he could not focus. I don't know, like, cause I'm not someone who's an expert in this area, but he would go on tangents about Lego and ninja stars. And he would like, if he gets a subject going, he'll stick on it and he'll talk about it for like an hour. Right. And a lot of teachers
they couldn't tolerate that.
They couldn't tolerate that, or they didn't know how to like kind of like take that energy and steer it towards like, okay, you like stars and planets, let's talk about planets and like let's try to do a project about that. They would just either like beat him, like
corporal punishment type stuff.
Kind of thing, yeah, where it's like they get smacked or they'll like get pulled around and yanked around and shoved into corners and told, don't act like that, stop talking, listen to what you're told. And that same kid like also started developing aggression issues, and I would see him just start crying and he would start like banging on his head and just in tears. I think he was just overwhelmed with emotion. He did not know what to do with it. Right. So it made me sad. So whenever I could, I'd try to let him talk and just let him like let out what's inside. But in the end of the day, I was with him for 2 hours or 3 hours a day. So there's not much I could do.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot more that, he's experiencing. So was your interest or awareness of mental health, is that when it started, or is it started before kind of, is that something like you went into recognizing and paying attention to, or did that start after?
I think it was kind of strange because growing up also in Lebanon, it's something that no one talks about. It's a very taboo subject, mental health and depression. Like, what's that? You're just sad. Stop being a wussy and, grow up kind of thing. So I think I was around 11 years old or 12 years old when I started feeling like sad all the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand it. I was
Right.
like, everyone feels sad. It's a sucky world, Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Like I was like, okay, everybody's sad. It's not just me. I didn't notice it being a problem until later on, 13, 14, I started writing poetry and writing songs as a way to get out of the whole depression and like as a way to like give an outlet to my emotions. And I started noticing, no, I think I'm a little bit sadder than everyone else around me, especially when one of the things I remember was I had a poem, like my first actual poem was 99 Ways I'd Kill Myself. So I was like,
That's a sign, right?
Nah, not everyone says that stuff. So yeah. And I was afraid my dad would see it. Like that, like there was no like trusting environment there, especially like knowing that I had to be tough for my dad because there in Lebanon it's more of like you had to be a macho man, you had to be strong, you got to provide for your family. So like I knew that was a sign of weakness in that culture, so I didn't really show it at the beginning.
Right.
And so I already knew about that, and later on stuff happened in my future with mental health and depression, but I had known about it kind of from an early age.
But it started in around high school age, and so did you have? So I mean, do you think that the poem that the 99 Ways, was that something that you had been thinking about in terms of over time, and then you put it out into poetry, or is that kind of felt like an impulsive?
I think it was more of like an impulsive reflection of what was inside,
right.
But I didn't even understand why I was writing at the time.
And what it meant, or what you were,
Like this is funny. No one laugh. I want to be a rapper.
Right.
Obviously not my career choice that I went with, but
graphic design, rapping, they're very close. And
sure. Thank you. But yeah, so I was like into writing before that a little bit, but then like I could notice how dark I was getting. And 99 was the first like official one that I was like, oh, this is a done piece. And I'm like, oh wow, this is a dark subject that I chose to do. And then after that, I started going to darker poetry. But even my friends around me would notice, it was kind of like, even with your friends, there was this kind of stigma of like, hey, this is nice, but how about we tone it down a little bit? Like you're getting a little too depressing for us. Like you're bringing us down, man.
You're killing my vibe.
Yeah.
Well, so I would imagine that if as a whole culture, you're taught to not give much value to mental health, or not pay a whole lot of, like, people not only don't know how to deal with their own mental health, but then they don't know how to help anybody that is displaying sadness, or like that makes everybody else uncomfortable. Like I don't want, it's weird to be around you when you're acting this way, which actually there's not a whole lot. I mean, there's a lot of similarities in terms of, Appalachian culture and, kind of working class culture of, got to be strong, got to, persevere, grit, everything like that. So taking time to express that you're sad is not something that we as a society are very comfortable with.
Yeah. Well, I was just about to ask you about that also, because I noticed like when being in the Eastern cultures, or like my dad is a Lebanese guy, very traditional man, but he fit in right around like perfectly here in Appalachia when he was here, because they have very similar morals and very similar values when it comes to hard work, grit, and just kind of taking care of your family and being a family person, a community person. So it was kind of really easy, the transition from that culture to here. And do you think that this is a problem that is not just geographical? It's also something that depends on the circumstances of that culture. Like places that notoriously had to work hard to get where they are, they don't value or don't give value to mental health as much as places that are like more metropolitan, I guess.
I think it's this fear of weakness, and am I going to get hurt? Am I going to lose out on an opportunity? I mean, we think about, I've had conversations, you think about like people in the military or people like police, where I can't show vulnerability, because if I show vulnerability, number one, that's going to cause danger and harm. I could lose my job. I could get hurt. I could get, people are going to take advantage of me. And because, for rooted in society and just mental health and mental illness altogether isn't necessarily painted the nice picture.
No.
You know, like in movies or just in the terms that are used, you know, so why would I really want to identify with crazy or, you know?
Well, psycho gets thrown around a lot,
Right.
a little too much, doesn't it? Yeah.
Right. I mean, just the term psychotherapy is not the most welcoming, wonderful kind of term, right? And so it doesn't necessarily show as part of, we've had mental health issues for, I mean, forever.
Yeah.
I mean, was it Van Gogh who cut off his ear? And, you know, there's all these different people, you know, historically that have suffered. And for example, like recently the Meghan Markle
Prince Harry.
Prince Harry. They're, you know, there's backlash for them expressing that they are suffering, right, and struggling with things, because you don't have a right to suffer. You have all the things in the world, and
exactly.
So, you know,
well, like that's the funny thing is because like Eastern cultures would think the same about any other American. Like there was a study done that if you make more than $35,000 a year, you're in the top 1% of the world. So probably like everywhere else in the world, kind of like countries like my dad's country, Lebanon, which is going through hyperinflation right now,
right.
And you know, people whose salaries used to be $2,000 or $3,000 is now $200 or $300 are telling me like, why are you sad? Why are you depressed? Like, hey, you're living fine. Yeah. It's that mentality that I feel like that's international. It's not just, I mean, like you said, with Meghan and Harry, I mean, they're getting crap for just opening up about their own mental health issues, and like they're not allowed to just because they're rich and they're well off. I mean,
you know, if I could have your life, right? You know, like how dare you not kind of appreciate those opportunities. And there's an interesting book called Cultures of Respect. It's really academic, so it's not like the most fun read.
Page turner.
right. But it's there's this anthropologist in Vancouver who spent 6 months in a fourth world country. I can't remember. It's somewhere in maybe Africa or I can't remember what, I think it's Africa. And in this fourth world country where like they have nothing, they eat like, you know, potatoes, and that's about it, because they're just whatever they can grow. There's all these happy kids running around. They're walking miles to school. They're just happy. They're just enjoyable. And she found that it's just in terms of the way they treated and raised their children. They empowered kids. They encouraged independence. They, you know, creativity. You know, the things that you were trying to accomplish in the class you're teaching. You know, just allowing them to explore and learn, you know.
And kind of grow those social skills too. Like social skills are super important for kids. If they don't know how to act in social situations, it can get awkward and they can feel like they're like not normal amongst their peers or anything, because we're not allowing them just to discover who they are as people. And one thing I thought was interesting, and I thought like this could be a reason why people hate on Meghan and people of like who are well off but still have problems, is I think some people think that, oh, if I had money, like I'm depressed, I'm sad, I'm in a bad spot. If I had money, all my problems would be solved.
Right.
And so they're seeing their own vision of
what they could do in
what they
situation.
could do, and it's still not working. So it's like, we have to realize that this problem isn't just financial and materialistic. There's something deeper to this. Yeah. And I feel like, unfortunately, we just say, hey, you're too rich to be sad. Calm down, sit down on the side.
Right. And it's just, and ultimately we're taking snippets and not really understanding their experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think we have to take time to understand their experience.
Do you think there'll ever be like a magic pill where you're like, have you ever watched Equilibrium?
I have not.
Oh, it's the guy who played Batman, who did the whole
Christian Bale?
Yeah.
There was a lot of Batmans.
The one who does that voice. He has that movie Equilibrium where they take a pill and they don't feel anything. So it's like emotions are put aside.
Right.
Like you don't have to feel pain or happiness. That's the backdrop to it. But do you ever think that mental health or mental health disorders or issues would ever be solved by such a way, or is it too deep to get to?
That would be interesting concept, but I think there's two things that I think about when you say that is one, if you look at emotions, negative emotions as being an illness, like all these emotions are normal, like sadness, frustration, happiness, jealousy. All these are emotions. How we deal with those emotions, how we treat those people that have those emotions, is whether we help people, talk through those emotions and understand them and experience them. But when we put like a DSM and put a label as a disorder, it's just, I think it's going to be really hard to say that there would never be any mental health problems.
Yeah.
My concern would be if you created something that got rid of emotions, we would be very vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because if we didn't understand things that made us upset and cause us pain, or thing that made us angry, we would be vulnerable to survival, because we wouldn't really recognize when we're in danger, or when we're in trouble, or when we need to repair a relationship, or the other, like you said, the drawback is they didn't have happiness either.
Yeah.
So then you're living a very numb life.
Yeah. Which was basically the whole concept of the movie, is like showing how life would be without emotion, and it was pretty sad.
Yeah, and I think that's the unfortunate thing, is that we don't give any positive value to painful emotions, because I think they have meaning. They're information. They give us reason for doing certain things. They give us impetus to make decisions and make change, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's always a lesson to be learned from the pain. So that's something, like, one thing I never thought of is regretting what I've been through. I've always been like, all right, yeah, that was great experiences, no matter good or bad, because I'm the person I am today because of those. And, I wouldn't get rid of anything that would happen. I would have felt the same way. And, I'm glad that I felt that way. But it's still kind of like, the way is to normalize sad emotions. It's kind of like bring it out of bring it to conversation and normalize it. Is that what you're saying, kind of thing?
Well, yeah, and let's just be honest with ourselves. Everybody, even in China, they're feeling these emotions. They're just not sharing it with everybody.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like we're trying to pretend that these things don't exist, but they do exist. Yeah. And it eventually, causes. I would be interested to know, in those kind of cultures where school's very like, this kind of stoic way, if there was any differences at home, like if there was any families that really tried to embrace those things at home and provide those emotional needs, like what had certain people succeed in that culture and then others really struggle and maybe turn to suicide or, really break down.
Well, like, in the one thing I noticed was kindergartens, for example. Kindergartens were very colorful, and there was a lot of games, there was a lot of exploration, there was like not much strain on the students. And as soon as you hit like primary school, like it completely switches. It's like now these rigid walls are all colored white, no fun, study, write notes, take notes. If you mess up, you get your hand like slapped with a ruler.
Right.
And it turns into like almost like a military style way of teaching, like just in 1 year. So this kid's used to like playing and getting to socialize, and then suddenly he's in primary school and he has to like wake up at this time and have everything done by 8 p.m. or he's in trouble.
Right.
But I do think it's getting better, because a lot of parents are just noticing these things. It's maybe a little bit later than here or some other places in Europe, but they're starting to notice that this is a real problem, and that this is, their kid might be sad, and it's okay for him to be sad. And as long as they talk about it in open communication, it's all their kid could probably ask for, is, just to be listened to and heard. It is getting better, I think, because popular media, social media is spreading there a little bit more. Consumer intelligence is higher, so that they're finding ways to like explore different parts of the internet that usually there are not explorable.
Right.
I mean, they don't have Google, they have Baidu, Weibo, WeChat, all that stuff, and some certain sensitive subjects are taken off there.
Right.
For example, the Li Yi story of the 19-year-old girl who committed suicide in Gansu. So this girl was sexually harassed by her teacher in high school. She was around 16 or 17 when that happened. And when she was harassed, the school wanted to kind of push it under the rug and tried to pay the father The father didn't want to, so they tried to pursue justice. The jury or whatever judicial system that they had there deemed it not worthy enough for jail time or not a serious enough crime. So they pardoned him, and he went to back teaching her in the same class in the same school.
Wow. Yeah.
All that she was offered was an apology. Like, sorry, that stuff happens.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming she had some problems after that, PTSD. I can't even imagine what was happening inside, and her not being able to get help or having no one to listen to her or take her claims or accusations seriously.
Right.
So when she was 19, she had enough, and she was on the building. I think it was a 17-floor building, and she was ready to jump, and there was a couple of people under the building who were shouting out things like, hurry up, I need to go pick up my kids.
Right.
And hurry up, I need to go pick up my kids, or come on, you're wasting our time.
Yeah.
Like, get
just
over
get
with
it done.
Yeah, just terrible things. At the time, I just couldn't believe it. And the only person who was up there trying to help was a firefighter, brave young guy, who was telling me, just come with me. I got you.
You'll be okay.
Like, you'll be okay. He's trying to talk. We don't really know what he said, but I'm assuming it's around those lines. And what's been said online is her last words were, "Let me go. I need to leave this place." And so, like, I couldn't believe that, like, it got that bad. And I just couldn't believe that people were actually shouting that in the street. Like, that's kind of what inspired me and my friends to open up, Let It Out in China, because we felt like maybe if she had a place where she could talk, none of us were licensed psychiatrists or therapists or had any form of training, but the one common thing we all had was we had all been through similar problems, kind of like where we felt like we wanted to commit suicide, or we had suicidal thoughts, or severe depression. So we felt like, man, if we were her friends, we would have been able to, like, listen to her and hopefully, like, try to help her out or help her at least deal with the emotions.
She would have not felt alone.
Not felt alone, and me at least not felt like she's alienated, or at least feel like, oh, there's someone, like, let us be your punching bag, come on, just say what you need to say, we're here. And I'm sure if she had had that, maybe it wouldn't have gone. I can't say I'm sure, but I was hopeful.
You're
thinking,
hopeful, right? Well, and that would be the idea behind. Clearly, you're describing an experience where someone is in this terrible pain, and the society around her is telling her that, number one, she doesn't have a right to feel this pain, or that she's the wrong person. Like, she's the one at fault or doing something that she shouldn't, basically her reality gets rejected. Right.
Yeah.
And, and so how would you feel going through life where your reality is
not reality,
in
the society's eyes or in other people's eyes,
right,
in your circle. And I think that's what inspired us. And the cool thing is, once we started doing Let It Out, so we started it, we couldn't just go in saying, hey, you building or you institute, we're just going to talk about mental health and try to spread awareness, because it was still a stigma. Not a lot of companies wanted to, like, piggyback that idea. So we had to kind of sell it as hey, we're going to do a talk, kind of like a TED Talky kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
We're like, we'll talk about mental health, but they'll learn English through it. So we started it with this kind of
sort of academic reward, right?
Yeah.
Benefit.
Yeah. So we were, like, sneaky about it.
Sure.
And so when I went up in front of, like, the first time we went there, I think it was like 40 people. And I told my story with depression and about my suicide attempt and all that. They kind of came forward with, people who I looked at and I felt like they were giving me judgmental eyes, or they were kind of like restraint or like keeping at a distance. They opened up and they were actually, not admitting it because it seems like a crime, but like,
well, just being open.
Yeah.
Just you gave them permission to talk.
Yeah. So they were opening up as well. And I felt the kind of like, oh, finally we can talk about this.
Right.
Like, yeah, that's awesome. So we just started doing that more often. We just started labeling it as English classes, and then, like, talking about it. And then we had enough of a following and enough people interested in this idea that we started doing like weekly get-togethers or having kind of like delegates in each part of Nanjing, because it's a big city.
Right.
Like delegating weekly meetings and like trying to, if someone comes up and says, hey, I think I might need help, because in the end we're not licensed physicians or a psychiatrist or a mental health therapist, that we would try to at least lead them to that.
Did they have that? I mean, what were the like, were there therapists or psychiatrists, or?
They were hard to find, but yeah. There were. I think a lot of times when they would study psychology, it would be more of like, I just want to understand human beings,
right?
Not I want to help.
Sure. I just want to understand the psychology
of why someone's
the mind
doing this.
And,
and that could be for marketing, advertising, for
right.
many other aspects of
sure.
life. But they were hard to find. They were there. Some of them were my friends who were Chinese citizens themselves were not happy with, because they said they took the herbal approach to solving those problems, which may work for some people. But, you know, for the people that we knew,
they weren't,
it wasn't
uncomfortable with that.
It wasn't a solution really, like for them, because they were given herbs to drink and boil, and you know they still weren't confronting those emotions that were inside. But we tried to steer them to the right person. There were a couple of foreign psychiatrists there who had opened up practices in Shanghai. Problem was pricing, honestly. Like the affordability of it was an issue.
Probably wasn't much coverage on insurance either. Because if it's not identified as
a necessity, basically,
yeah.
It's not like something that you need, so why should we pay for it? You know, why should your insurance pay for it if it's something that's not that big of a problem, really? Mm-hmm. And you know, for the average salary of a Chinese millennial was around 4,000 yuan, which is like around $600 here. Wow. And if one session was costing them half of their salary, they're not gonna. They're not gonna do it. Yeah. So it was like we had a long-term plan to kind of start to help raise funds, maybe get a backer to start like doing fundraisers, or to kind of get like dollars in so we can try to help pay for those sessions. And it was a little bit hard to get people to back it too. Yeah. Because it wasn't profitable. Which I understand. Touche, but like that wasn't what we were, looking for, profit.
Well, and it's hard to invest in something that they don't understand or it doesn't make sense to them. And so, you definitely had some hurdles to get over.
Well, I mean, the funny thing is like, maybe if I hadn't been suicidal or gone through all that, maybe I wouldn't even have had tried to open up something like that.
Right.
So unfortunately, I feel like when it becomes big enough a problem and enough people are affected by that, or they start realizing that, hey, this is an actual problem, they're going to start putting more effort into building up such organizations and trying to get people help.
Was it, and ultimately you had the big crisis of this girl who, took her life, completed suicide, that sparked there's a need to do this, right?
Yeah.
And that's typically how these things take shape, is a huge crisis happens that, moves the mission forward. We've had 2 episodes about suicide prevention, and both of our guests, well, the 3 guests, we had 2 on one show and 1 on the other, they had lost their child.
Yeah.
So we've never really talked to somebody who has either made an attempt or had the suicide ideations, but found a way through it to have a brighter outcome or a more positive outcome and not take their life. And so I'm curious is in terms of your journey and what you went through, how you found your way through, a moment of significant despair and, at a place that no one really wants to be at. Right.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was 17 at the time. I guess I'll just start with the story of how I attempted it, and then like
how you found your way out.
Yeah. When I was 17, I was going through a lot of problems with my father and just society in general. I didn't feel like I belonged in that society or in that religion that I was surrounded by, and being told to suppress my feelings, even by my close friends. They were like, hey, please don't kill my vibe.
Right.
So I felt like I had no outlet, no way out. So I skipped school one day, and my dad had a gun in his drawer. So I decided, all right, I'm going to take the gun. I'm gonna do it. Today's the day.
Right.
I'm going to do it. So
Was there something about that day?
I think it was just, I just had a bad week the week before, and I was just like, I had been crying earlier, and I was just saying like, I'm done. Like,
Right.
what's all this? Like, I don't see a way out of this. I don't think anyone's going to hear me. Actually, no one cares. Like, I was like, oh, if I died, who's going to actually care? My mom might cry for a week, but then she'll be fine.
She'll get over it.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
And my dad doesn't really like me anyways, and he's fine.
Right.
Like that
Right.
kind of mentality.
Right.
But, so then I think something just snapped randomly in my head. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. Like, I can't just like put this off. Kind of like it was
Stop
on my
talking
head.
about it. Just, yeah.
I actually had it kind of like at one point in my like teenage years, I had it like as an agenda, like, oh, okay, I'm going to give myself 2 or 3 years and I'm just going to do it. Like, I'm going to give this a little try. So then I go into the house, I get the gun out of the drawer, and I sit on my mom's bed, and facing their bed kind of the side, there's a mirror. And I was just looking at myself in the mirror for like about a good hour, like kind of like whoever is in my head is now there, and now like I'm talking to that other person. And I was like trying to convince myself in some way not to do it, but myself in the mirror wasn't as smart as I was on the bed, in my opinion.
Right. Right.
So I just cocked it and I pulled. Now, I don't know if I did something stupid and I didn't cock it right, or if I did like there wasn't a bullet and I just forgot to like
Right.
load it properly. I don't know what it was, but I remember I pulled the trigger and nothing happened. I assumed it jammed, or I assumed I did something wrong.
Sure.
But I think as soon as I pulled and I didn't die, because I was thinking, all right,
Right. It'd
done.
be pretty
Yeah.
quick. And
It'll be quick and easy, And then I'm just staring at myself in the mirror with a gun to my head, with my hand already pulled on the trigger. And I was like, okay, wow. I just couldn't like process all of it.
Right.
Like, cause I wasn't religious per se. I believed in God, and I believe I'm a spiritual person.
Sure.
I identify as that, but
you were having some religious
struggle. Yeah.
conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, is this God telling me like he wants to torture me for another 3 years? Like, what's
Right.
this? And I was just shocked, and I started crying. I put the gun away, and I just went and like slept and just like cried myself to sleep. And then when my mom came home, I just pretended like nothing had happened because I didn't want to freak her out.
So not even at that point, you were definitely not feeling comfortable kind of telling somebody?
Well, it had arisen with my mom before about me being sad and having mental health issues. We actually tried to go to a psychiatrist who I won't say anything mean about anyone. I'll only say nice things. So
No, I mean,
he was competent with other people,
but you didn't connect or it didn't feel
because his approach was through religion. I think my parents nitpicked
Sure.
that specific
right.
person who was like, are you praying enough? Are you talking to God? I'm like, that's not the problem.
Right, right.
Like, I don't have a problem with God. It's everything else. And also, I mean, we were a very strict religious household. My dad didn't even let me listen to music. He kicked me out of the house one time because I had music on my laptop. So,
Right.
he was with me in the therapy session. It felt super uncomfortable, and he didn't want to be there. So it lasted like half an hour. On the
Right.
way back up in the car, my sister's next to me. She's like, how'd it go? And I'm just crying. And I'm like, fine. Like,
Right.
trying to be like cool kid, like, oh yeah, it was all right.
Right.
And my dad's like, yeah, we're never doing that shit again.
Right.
And then so we just went, and that was the end of it for that. Like that was my opening up to my family. They didn't like
I
it.
tried it. It's definitely not going to work.
Yeah,
And-
I'm not doing that again. That was too
Right.
that was too hard. So then after the suicide attempt, though, I started noticing that, like, okay, how can you do this without committing suicide? Like, come on, you have to find a way out of this depression, or a way that you can vent without talking to family, because they're not going to be the solution, obviously.
Right.
My friends are judging me and saying, hey, don't kill my vibe, or, you're too much. So what can I do to let it out in another way? Yeah. Go ahead.
Can I roll you back just to kind of clarify, at least from my understanding, is when that happened, you said, okay, there was a kind of a turn where you're like, I need to figure something else out.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was like a kind of like, okay, I'm alone in this. Well,
Right.
I think looking past, we're all teenagers and we all think the world's against us. So I'm sure had I spoken to my mom and parents maybe in a different manner or whatever, maybe a different path. But yeah, at that time I felt, okay, I'm all alone. There's no one here who's going to help me get through this. So might as well find a solution. Right. And that's the whole thing where I like was previously brought up, the vat of acid moment. It's kind of like when the Joker was like dropped into a vat of acid and then suddenly he's got, or any kind of comic characters dropped into a vat of acid, they get superpowers, right?
Right.
It's like a common theme. So I felt like that was my vat of acid, whereas like I came out of this, now I'm going to use
if I can survive this, I can.
Yeah. I can do anything. And also my creativity, which I thought was always my best asset. Right. I was like, oh, I'm super creative. You know, I don't like myself. I think I should die, but at least I know I'm creative. So I started using that to like just go crazy through comedy. I started writing comedy at that point. I started writing songs and lyrics, but keeping it as a secret because I don't want nobody to know about it.
Right.
But like I really dove into the creative side of my life at that time. Yeah. I even started a band unsuccessfully. Yeah.
But you had fun. Those were things that.
It was even fun because I even had to hide it away from my parents. So it was even like.
So you were doing some like risk taking.
Yeah. It was sneaky. It was fun. It was exciting. But it was also helping me. And like, I don't know if, because I still wasn't dealing with my emotions. I was just distracting myself in some way or giving myself an outlet to express them instead of talking to someone and trying to deal with it. But that was my path until China. And then in China, I started getting to stand up more and I started like delving really hard into the stand-up world there.
Stand up in China.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Was it? Okay.
Because there was a huge foreign crowd. So like, a lot of people who are there on business, who open companies or who are teaching. There's a lot of teachers there, English teachers that go to China. So there was always these bars that like they were known that those are the foreigner hangouts.
Sure.
You know, and so I would go there and we had this comedy night and I did my first set there and everyone liked me and I was like, all right, this is awesome. I enjoyed it. I like making people laugh. I like joking. I started doing more and more sets. The hitch came when a friend of mine who me and him would, you know, drink and talk about our emotions. Once we get a couple of drinks in, we'd start getting loose and friendly and start talking about our emotions. Where he would identify also as being depressed and having, you know, problems in the past with his family or controlling his emotions. So I brought up my mental health issues in the stand-up because I feel like if it's happened to me and if it's my problem, I'm going to joke about it because, you know, as
I have a right to.
I have a right to joke about my own problems. I'm not going to joke about, you know, your thing or trying to diminish anything that anyone else is feeling. But this is something I'm feeling and I'm going to joke about it. In my own way, I was kind of like, hey, this is a thing. I'm going to talk about it because it should be normal already. So I didn't really consider it as a taboo subject. I went to him after the set and he's like, yeah, I liked it, but, you know, maybe you shouldn't talk too much about that stuff. And I'm like, why? And he's like, you know, people might think you're a little bit crazy. I'm like, really? They were all laughing. You were laughing.
Right.
And I just got people offered me to buy me drinks, so I don't think they think I'm that crazy.
Right.
And I think he was afraid to open up, so he just kind of telling me like, hey, don't, like, my comfortability level is here. You're exceeding mine. You know, maybe you should hold it back. And there was a couple other comics who kind of gave me those similar comments. Were like, you know, don't get it too dark.
It's going a little too far.
It's going a little too far, or people are taking offense. And I'm like, why are they taking offense? You know, this is something that happened to me personally.
Right.
But I think it took me a while to understand the stigma behind it and to understand how to navigate it.
And yeah, I think people get uncomfortable around things they don't understand.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they wouldn't know how to be around you. Like, wait, am I gonna, you know, what's gonna happen?
Like, are you gonna start like, you know, cutting yourself here right on the table? Like they would kind of give me that look, like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm fine. You know, I'm laughing. This is how I deal with stuff sometimes. You know.
Right.
And I thought it was important to start joking about it to kind of like bring it into the light. Like, hey, this is a thing. And look at me, I'm fine. I'm laughing. You know, we can all get through this. We just have to open up and talk about it more.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe doing it in a way that you're hoping is non-threatening.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I mean,
I can, you know, let's sit down and talk about your mental health is a little bit more intimidating than you going up and doing stand up and that type of thing. So but the let it out piece, you had people that kind of joined together with you. This wasn't a solo mission. You had found people that had felt similar experiences and shared. where did you get to that point where you kind of, did you find healing through even just organizing and doing Let It Out and speaking about, like, just being able to talk about it and get it out?
It felt healing and a little bit good to kind of be like, all right, I don't want anyone to have to try to do what I did. I want to like try to stop that before that happens, or try to give them an outlet so they don't get to that level. And a lot of me finding the people to Let It Out with was just hanging out with people and talking to them, and like, unfortunately, being vulnerable in front of them and like being able to talk about that stuff in front of them, like, was like, if I wasn't vulnerable and if I didn't talk about it, they wouldn't have talked about it, and they wouldn't have opened up, and then we wouldn't have Let It Out. So I feel like a big part of my process was I think this ticked when I started doing stand up, and people gave me crap for like talking about depression, and I was like, you know what? No, I'm gonna talk to everyone about it. And now, like, and I'm not gonna be like, hey, I'm depressed, what about you? Like, in a way, like, where, like, you know, it's okay to be sad, and then I just talk about a past experience, and, you know, hey, have you ever felt like that too? Or like, you know, do you know anyone who feels like that? And the more I would talk about it, the more normal it was with a lot of people in my circle, and the more they actually like, oh, actually, yeah, my friend might enjoy talking to you. He's been through some stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah, give me his number. Let's talk. Like, if you need someone to chit chat with, I'll be that guy. Mm-hmm. And so my friend Bowen and Ire, they, like, one's a travel agent. Mm-hmm. So he travels all around the world. So he has a lot of like influence from different cultures. Sure. He's a very like travel person, but he also suffers from depression, or I don't want to say suffers, I guess. What's the proper terminology that you would say, for example?
I mean, suffers from depression, I think is an appropriate term. I mean,
I just want to make sure, like,
I mean, I don't know if he's been diagnosed with depression.
Well, that's the thing. Like, in his opinion, he was. Like, right. And for like, he was feeling depressed, or he had depressive thoughts and feelings.
Well, and I think people have to kind of recognize that I'm experiencing this, you know, bout of depression, bout of sadness, bout of whatever you want to call it. It's something that, you know, I'm not feeling right, and I need to, you know, reach out and connect to heal. Yeah. Right. And so, and I think, you know, you going back to kind of something you said earlier is that, you know, this didn't just come from nothing. Yeah. Like, this came from our experience, our life, and the things that we're struggling with, you know, and that's the thing, is that our mental health is directly tied to our experiences and how we deal with those experiences, and what happens if we are struggling to deal with those experiences, you know, doing what our brain is designed to do, which is to connect with others and to support each other. And that's really why those things, I think, happen, like Let It Out, where you find people of similar experience, similar lived experience, right? It happens in the world of addiction. I mean, there's AA and NA, and it happens. I mean, we have a Hope Group in this area for people that have lost somebody to suicide and things like that. There's, you know, so we're naturally drawn to seek, you know, we're designed to seek out help
or camaraderie in a certain way,
like, connection and I think, though, if you're in a culture that doesn't acknowledge that we should be able to kind of connect and support each other, and we're not just trying to achieve over somebody, or you know, get the highest test score, or you know, do these things that where we feel like being open creates vulnerability, then you know, we're going to struggle.
Well, it was a struggle. I mean, the good thing about Let It Out and how we connected and who I was connecting it with and who I was starting with was, one was a businessman of like high stance in his company, and he was coming out and just talking about his like experience with mental health issues and his experience in his life, and him opening up, and someone of that caliber in society's eyes opening up. And also teachers there are very highly regarded. So if a teacher was coming out and saying it, they're like, oh wow, this
must be real.
This must be real. Yeah. Especially for them to risk their position in such a way, because they're, like, as we said, like, you know, someone might be viewed as crazy or psycho in their eyes. So if a teacher's coming out saying, hey, I have depression or whatever, then people are gonna be like, oh, I don't want them around my kids.
Right.
Or I don't want him running my company, or, I don't want someone unstable, taking care of my business or doing my papers or account or like my accounts or whatever.
Right.
So it was a risk for them, and they took that huge risk, and I'm like super proud that they did.
Yeah. No, that takes a lot of courage. And and one of the things we try to communicate, because everybody looks at their mental health as like a weakness, is that if you go to therapy or if you open up to somebody, that takes incredible strength, because we live oftentimes in a society or culture that frowns against that.
Yeah.
So to go against what society is telling you not to do takes incredible courage and strength.
Well, like I kind of right now how I deal with it currently, because I feel like in my case I've never it's not like a mole where I just can take it off and that's it, I'm done with it. It's always a part of who I am. So how I deal with it is kind of like use the weakness as a strength. Sometimes funnily enough, like I feel like this is a little bit weird, but how I deal with it is like sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I was sad, or I wish I was upset right now, because I feel like that's when I'm most creative. And sometimes I'll be happy and be like, I've been happy for a while. Right. Like, this is strange. I need to do something creative, like to get that, like use those emotions. So like, it's kind of like, it's a weakness, I know, or not a weakness. Some people view it as a weakness, or it's like negative feelings. But if you know how to use those negative feelings to your advantage, it's a great thing in your life. If you know how to use that to be creative or to motivate yourself to exercise, because a lot of people deal with emotions through exercise. So if you can use those negative energy, those negative thoughts and that negative energy to turn it into something positive, or to kind of just rear it towards the right direction, then dealing with it becomes easier.
Yeah, and I think that you're talking about just being aware of what you're experiencing, so that you know what you need to do. Yeah. And I think when you spend so much time trying to avoid feeling that, then you are unaware of what's going on, and then that's when I don't want to feel this way. This is uncomfortable. Yeah. And you're looking for a quick solution to get rid of that uncomfortable feeling or sensation that you're experiencing. So interestingly enough, like the same parts of the brain that really stimulate creativity are where our negative emotions hang out. Yeah. I mean, that's why we have, troubled musicians and artists. And
Jon Stewart said, like, I don't know a single stand-up comedian who's not had any problems. Like,
right. I've listened to a number of podcasts and shows like that. And every comedian that I've ever listened to talks about
something messed up
that they're struggling with. And so, you draw your creativity. And I think that concept of using negative emotions as a strength is really just finding value and purpose in all your emotions. Yeah. So doing, like, not seeing it as good or bad, but saying, okay, I've got this feeling. What can I do with it that's going to be productive and valued? And, yeah. So I think that's huge.
Like, and especially if you teach kids, like, I guess theories. If you teach a kid, like, hey, I'm feeling sad, well, draw something or make something. What do you want to do with, like, okay, you're feeling sad. What do we do with that? Not just like feeling sad. Oh, let's make you happy. Like trying to negate, like, let's avoid that sadness and just jump back on the happy train. No. Okay. Let's ride their sad train. Okay. How are you feeling? How do we use this sad feeling to, like to create something or to make it, I guess not, to make it something like, I can't find the word though.
Well, it's interesting because there's a book, Healing. It's by Peter Levine. I can't remember it. He did Waking the Tiger, but it's another book. But I was reading that he wrote, and he's talking about this moment where he's walking out of his house, going down the sidewalk or whatever to go meet a friend for like brunch or something like that, and he ends up getting hit by a car. And he's like on the road and he's going through this like discharge experience. And this doctor or somebody comes up to him and says, what do you want me to do? I'm here to help. And he tells her, don't do anything. Just leave me alone. Yeah. Because we know that there's this, and you see this in animals where there's this natural like discharge of the emotion or the experience or the physical experience that your body has to go through. So like animals don't get PTSD because if they survive an attack and don't die, they discharge and they just shake and they go through it, and their body kind of goes through the whole cycle of this emotion. But where we as humans get in trouble is we try to stop feeling that feeling.
Yeah.
So then it makes it more intense and more worse because that emotion still wants to happen.
Yeah.
And so it's like a pressure cooker, you know, and it's trying to explode out because we're trying to hold it down. And so when we don't give awareness to those emotions, then that emotion is going to find its way out there some way. So, you know, the question is how much of our own mental health struggles happens by not recognizing, acknowledging, or giving importance to those emotions and listening to those emotions.
Which is why awareness was super important. And like, it's important now. It's important in Appalachia, I believe, a lot.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's still a huge stigma in this.
It's getting, I'll tell you what, it's getting better, but yes, there is. Yeah. And there's this, there are definite community, like Marietta community examples of stigma that are really present. And I think that, you know, it really takes people almost just experiencing it. Like you need to be with somebody that's struggling with mental health. Like spend time with that person because it's the unknown. The unknown's scary.
Well, like that's what's scary too, is like, do you have to, like, I feel like sad sometimes. It might be the unfortunate truth that you have to go through it or know someone who goes through it to finally understand it. Cause it's like, you know, do you have to have cancer to understand, hey, cancer's a problem? Like, or do you have to have the flu to know there's something called the flu?
Right.
I feel like a lot of people just don't understand that, like, they're like, just because it doesn't happen to you doesn't mean it doesn't exist, or doesn't mean that, you know, it's not a problem somewhere else. And I hope that gets better. I hope people learn to start trusting more, like trusting in other people's experience, and not just that they're weak or that it's just their own personal little problem. They don't know how to deal with their emotions. That no, this is something that's happening to a lot of people. And the more we're just aware of it and able to talk about it, the easier it gets for all of us. Yeah.
And even if we're scared of people with mental health and struggle with understanding that, the solution is certainly not you're bad and you know, get away, you leper, you know, that's not the solution. That actually makes mental health problems worse. So when we reject it or we, you know, make it a bad thing, then we are making those problems worse. So the solution in all, even if you don't understand it, the solution is to understand.
Try to understand it.
Try to understand it, because that's only going to be like, we're kind of in our own cycle of making it worse.
Well, it's kind of like even with COVID or anything like that. The solution is to know, okay, that's a disease. We have to study it, learn about what it is, and then try to come up with a solution for it.
Right.
If we just don't acknowledge it, like, oh, COVID's not a thing. Nope. It's just going to keep getting worse.
Don't look it directly in the eye.
Don't look directly into the sun.
Right.
But you have to acknowledge it. You have to talk about it openly. And then, you know, great minds are out there who will try to come up with ways to deal with it, with ways to try to, like, give outlets to people, a way to normalize it a little bit more.
Yeah,
I think it's coming in the future. We're definitely doing way better than we were before in the world when it comes to this.
Yeah. Well, I know, like, when we started this podcast, like, in your example of it is like people reach out. Yeah. Like, hey, I want to do something. You know, or I want to help, or I want to, you know, or it's just really great to hear you talk about that or do something about that. And that's the thing, is the majority, I believe. Is willing to do its part for mental health.
Its part, and like,
they're not the loudest.
Yeah.
The loudest is the ones that makes the stigma as powerful as the stigma can be.
Yeah.
But the majority don't know what to do necessarily, or need kind of that push from somebody else to kind of bring it out in the open. Just like Let It Out, where I need to stand up and tell my story. And then that kind of opens the door, opens the gate for people to kind of go, okay, now I can, you know, now I feel safe enough to talk about it.
Unlike with AA, the anonymity part, because I have a person who's in alcohol AA, and I went to one of the meetings, and it's just amazing people. I'm like, just how they're able to talk about all the things that they've been through and what alcohol or any kind of substance has caused them, and they still laugh the loudest.
Yeah.
Like most positive, amazing people. And I feel like part of why they feel so comfortable and why they just get through every day is because once or twice a week, they get to go to this group where we all know, hey, we're all in this together, and they just let it all out and they talk about it freely. And so part of what we were trying to do in China was we had like an anonymity anonymous option where like we can set you up with a group where, you know,
no one identifies.
No one identifies. You can keep it completely secret. We totally understand that there's a professional risk here involved because of your job or anything coming out on social media. So if you choose to be anonymous with it, that's great. And there's also the one where like, hey, we're loud and proud. We want this to be a like, I know, you know what I mean? But like people deal with it in different ways. So I totally respect the whole anonymity part of it, as some people don't feel comfortable, but I feel like it's part of the duty of the people like me who are just a little bit louder than usual to kind of like make it a little bit more comfortable for them in case one day they do decide to be like, hey, I want to tell everyone. Maybe me blabbing my mouth for like 10 years before that will make it easier for them to finally do it and not feel like they're risking their job or anything. Which is what I think when I did let out, and the first time I said, hey, I almost committed suicide. I lived. I always have depressive thoughts. I still have suicidal thoughts after committing suicide, attempting. So, you know, that me opening up and like saying, okay, now everyone else can talk if they want. They felt more free. They felt like there wasn't that risk because, hey, there's that person taking a huge risk. My risk is not as big or is equal to, so I'm allowed to do that.
Well, and I think there's a couple things that are really powerful in what you're saying is one, it gave them permission to talk too. Two, I think it gives people hope. Okay, so you're experiencing this really painful thing, painful experience, and yet you're doing something about it. You're making progress. You know, you're still experiencing symptoms of depression, but you're able to kind of do something to heal, right? And so I think we can draw strength from other people when we connect like that. And I think, so there's great power in that is if you're leading the charge of healing, I can draw from that, you know?
Exactly.
And I think that's a really wonderful thing. And then, but I also think, I wonder, and I would imagine if maybe you had this experience where if I feel like I'm in whether it's reality or perception, but I'm in a society where people are going to reject me if I talk about my mental health, then I can't truly be me with anybody until I come across somebody who has those same experiences.
When I was younger and I ever told you, even my friends said, hey, you know, don't kill my vibe. I kind of became a chameleon where I was like, okay, this group of friends is like this. I'll change. I just want to fit in. I just want friends. So I'm going to fit in. I'm not depressive. I'm happy Husain now. I'm edgy Husain now. I'm edgy Husain who skips cool. You know, like I would just change my personality.
You lose yourself and all that, I would imagine.
And I think it's just like you get to a point where you're just fed up and you're like, you know what? I'm going to be me, really me. And then it just depends on the actual person, individual who's like, are they comfortable enough with themselves to be out there? Are they willing to take that risk of just being themselves, even if it's in a society where it's not acceptable? Well, I was used to struggling with that in Lebanon because when I was still working there and I was in college, in Lebanon, there was that, I felt like, okay, I should hide myself, but I kind of started getting sick of it at that point where like, do you know what? If it doesn't make sense, I'm going to say it. Wasn't the most popular person in the society there or in the hospital, because I worked in a hospital for a while. So it was freeing. And at one point I felt like, okay, I'm being alienated and many people want to hang out with me because I'm being a little too honest and being myself. But it felt freeing to finally just let everything out. Like just get off your shoulders. Just don't hide it, because I feel like with depression, especially if you pent it in more, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah, it's that pressure cooker. You're not. It just gets heavy and
don't
weighs
care
you
about
down.
society. Society sucks.
Right.
I'm joking, but yeah. So that's how I dealt with it, and that's how I start. Like here, I feel like people are starting to do that more. Where like they're starting to not care what society thinks and just be, hey, this is my opinion. Based on Twitter.
Right. And I mean, there's definitely like this double-edged sword with that is recognizing how we impact each other, but it's kind of like, how do we have to have outlets. We have to have a way to do something with what we're experiencing.
Yeah.
And, and that's hard when you don't have people you feel safe or comfortable with to kind of talk to about it.
So do you think that's where like anonymity is important?
Well, I think anonymity has a direct connection to the stigma.
Yeah.
Right. So if I have to be anonymous, then that means that I'm afraid about, I worry about how people will see me, in this way. But I do think it does kind of allow you to be free, in that setting. It's one place where I don't have to worry about those things.
Well, it's kind of like when you hear like doctor-patient confidentiality or lawyer-client confidentiality. It gives that person like, oh, okay, not everything's going to stay in here. No one's going to know outside. So it's kind of the same thing with emotions. We're like, okay, if I can say everything I want here.
It's my safe outlet. It's my safe place where I know that, this is where I can go, where people are going to treat me the way I want them to treat me in this situation. I can be supported. I don't have to worry about any negative ramifications for that. So it does create that safe environment, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really, a lot of times, what people need and what's going to get them that they're healing.
Yeah. And then through breaking the stigma slowly but surely, then that anonymity doesn't become so much of an importance because more people consider it normal. Like, I'm going to the doctor to check my knee. My knee's hurting. That's normal. Right. So then, hey, I'm going to my therapist. Yeah, that's normal. Like, eventually that'll be like, yeah, I'm going to my therapist.
Well, and you think about it, and this is kind of where I think, if you think about things like HIPAA and stuff like that, like, everything's kept confidential. There are struggles with that because we end up kind of not, like, we all should be able to communicate with each other. Like, if you were to come to therapy with me, I would want to be able to communicate with your wife and family, whoever is involved that can be a part of your support network. In the addiction world, where I'm fearful that if I tell my employer that I have a problem, that they're not going to want me to work. But then how do I tell my employer that I'm really struggling and need to go to a meeting and not get in trouble?
Yeah.
Like, is there a middle ground where I can take care of my mental health and not get in trouble for it, so that in the long run I can be a productive employee?
Yes. I think, it's getting there, because I feel like now mental health is covered on your insurance,
right?
Which I think before, I don't know how long ago where it wasn't. Probably in my grandfather and my father's younger years, it wasn't. So like, that's already a huge stride in itself, because you're able to say, hey, I need help.
And they have EAP, with employee assistance programs, which is designed for that. And that's, that's definitely,
you get that freedom to, okay, I can go get help and not worry about, like you said, losing my job. I think we're still not 100% there yet, but we will get there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of it's just hope. I think I just hope a lot. Like,
well, that kind of brings me to one of my questions of like, what is your hope for the future? What do you want to be able to accomplish, and what kind of hope do you see in the future, and whether about you or just in like your kids' generation, your kids' kids' generation, what you would like to see?
I'd like to see just like them being able to be sad, like, or for us to be like, I know that I can have direct change over my kids because they're going to be my kids. I'm going to be talking to them and having those discussions with them. And I always told my mom and my family, like, with my kids, we're going to talk about everything. Like, there's nothing where I'm like, oh no, because for example, like sex talks with kids, with your parents, usually they're awkward.
Right.
some of them don't have one. I didn't have one with my dad. And I felt like it was this unreasonable taboo around the subject where it's actually you should be educating so he doesn't make mistakes. You know?
Right.
Hey, use condoms, do this, be safe, you know,
Right.
certain subjects. Same thing with, I think, with mental health or if my kids' feelings. Like if I hope that later on in the generation, everyone talks to their kids like about everything, like nothing's off limits, because if you keep it hidden, it gets worse.
Right.
If you keep it pent up, it's like you said, a pressure cooker. It's going to explode.
Yeah.
So the more communication there is, the better. I just hope for the future that people start talking about it like it's nothing. Like it's kind of not like it's nothing. Like the opposite of what is right now. Kind of saying that it's nothing. It's a problem we want to avoid.
That's safe, and it
becomes something that's safe and that everyone's comfortable talking about it. And like you're no longer afraid to lose your job, or you're no longer afraid to be bullied or to have people look at you like you're an outcast because of it. I just hope for good things. I just like, I hope that, you know, me coming out and telling my story and getting work let out back up running here in the States. And I hopefully my friends in China are still doing what they're doing. My hope is that we just help whoever we can. Like all I can hope for is even if it's one person, that's one person who's better off than before.
Right. That's a positive direction. That's the direction you want to go in, right?
Yeah. Like there was someone who said like, you can't think about every like it's so sad because there's so many problems in the world, but all you can do is think about as much as you can do as a human. Like if you try to climb a mountain before you know how to climb stairs, you're not going to get anywhere. So goal number one is try to help as many people as possible. And then the more possible it becomes, the more we help. And, you know.
Well, and I think there's, you know, momentum that carries with that. And I think it happens. It spreads pretty quickly. And we've kind of recognized that in our field. So, you know, person goes in, we saw this in one of our local high schools where our therapist would start seeing a client, you know, kid in the school, and then the kid's friend would come and say, "Can I see you for therapy? Because he says you're really cool and you're really helpful. So can I, you know, do that?" And say, "Sure, let me tell you how it works." Yeah. And you know, it's that word of mouth of, he's going and talking to somebody about it, and it's helping them. Yeah.
And it's working for him.
And it's working for him. I feel similar things. I should, you know, give it a shot. And that's what we're hoping we'll do.
It's kind of like the domino effect. Like it just it goes and moves around. That's kind of like it also with the pay it forward kind of thing. Yeah. I think that's what happened in China was when me telling my story, someone is like, "Oh, I'll tell my story," and then he'll tell my story, and then let's all talk about it together, and then it just kept going and going. Right.
You just people are like I said, people are drawing strength from each other to kind of do what they've wanted to do. But they just needed that permission. You know, to happen. So, Husain, I really appreciate you coming on and telling your story. I think it's an important story to tell. I really enjoyed kind of talking about these things.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And second of all, like, I just think what you guys are doing is important, kind of like lighting a beacon in a foggy area where people can then find their way to a safe place and then help them with whatever they're going through. I think that's just something that it's great, and it's inspiring because it inspired me to kind of also let it out going again. And
awesome.
So, you know, thank you for everything you guys are doing. Like, it's amazing. No, super honored to be on.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks again to People's Bank for sponsoring this episode. People's Bank, headquartered in Marietta, Ohio since 1902, People's Bank has established a heritage of financial stability, growth, and community impact across Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia. We are so thankful for our sponsors like People's Bank, who help us accomplish awareness in and outside of our community. We continue to offer unique sponsorship opportunities, unlike television or radio ads, that our listeners will continue to hear even after the episode is released.